Hi, everyone. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I'm Ellen, and I am dedicated to interviewing these truth seekers who became truth tellers and warriors and who have this unwavering faith during this most incredible time in history. And I love hearing their stories, and I think they're going to be told for many, many years to come. Today, I'm interviewing John with TGI Now podcast, and he's from Florida, and he has been such a warrior. I'm just so excited to share his story and to hear myself more in detail because I'm just admire him so much. So, John, hi.
Hey, hi, Ellen. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for doing this. Gosh, when I started looking in and seeing some of the things, I was like, wow, what a brave warrior. So before I dive into going back to who you are as a kid, I just want to start out with, as you said, what activated you? When did you know? I watched the video of you being kicked out of just this school board meeting, and so I just want to hear that. I just think it's really important and where that all started.
Yeah, well, during 2020 and COVID, I was working at a local, the Chamber of Commerce, actually, the local Union County Chamber of Commerce, and I was there, starting in January 2020, and then starting building up to that. When March and COVID hit, I started to see what was happening in our community with the mask and all the things were happening with everybody was dealing with. And I was watching the school board meetings and I was paying attention. And I was like, and nobody's listening. The teachers weren't listening. I mean, the school board wasn't listening. These
Yeah,
women were going up there, these mothers with their babies going, look, I don't want to have my kids wearing these masks. This is not fair. Like, we have to have a choice. And I just saw that nothing was happening. And so I said to myself, I
right.
was like, you know what? And my son was in school at the time too. So I knew what he was dealing with. And I said, myself, I said, I need to go out to this meeting and just go out there and speak my truth, and just tell the school board that, we need to have an option here, that we have a choice. There's, the Constitution is our, that is the supreme law, and then they need to listen to the people. And so I just went out there and I used my voice, and lo and behold, it didn't take but a couple 48 hours, and I was on the front page of the newspaper locally here in Vero Beach, Florida. Chamber executive it was accused of bullying school board. And I thought, wow, like, I've lived in this town for 40 years. I grew up here. I had graduated high school here. I worked for the Salvation Army for 10 years. I worked for all these nonprofits in town. I raised all this money to build facilities and raise money to help families in need. And then all of a sudden I was on the front page as a bully. And I was like, wow. And it just hit me. Like, I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. What's good is bad, and what's bad is good. And I got activated, and I thought, oh, this is what I have to do now. This is what my purpose is I need to stand up for the kids, for our most vulnerable.
That's so amazing, and to watch you and we could talk about it later where I could put a link about of that in the description because very few people like you have during the pandemic were scattered like lighthouses,
Yeah.
you know, and because your bravery is rare. And so it's just amazing, I believe, how God works in scattering those brave people like you around the planet. And then, and you said then which catapulted your podcast basically from
Yeah,
there.
like right before that, exactly. So before that, I was thinking about, like, I was like, oh, what, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, and maybe that'll be the way to get the word out. And then I was like, all right, well, maybe I had it in the back burner, and then I got fired from the job. So then within 2 days after that happened, they put me on leave. I was all off for 2 weeks. I knew I wasn't going back. They literally kicked me out of the building, told me to get out of here. You're not welcome to here anymore. And I was like, wow, I basically it was a public humiliation for my ego is what happened, Ellen. Because
Yeah,
when you're in the community and you're a face of an organization like the Salvation Army, your ego becomes, that's who you are. And that's part of the
right.
awakening process, is to dissolve that ego. And so God, because I was thinking about leaving the job anyway, because I wasn't happy. It was very woke. It was very woke, and it was very liberal, and I just wasn't fitting in there anymore. And so I was thinking of quitting anyway. And God told me, I'm not going to let you do it this easy. He said, because I knew, because I used to just quit jobs and just like not have nothing to fall back on. And so I was going to do this again. I was going to cash out my 401k and I was just going to quit. And God was like, no, 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 you're going to get publicly humiliated, and then I'm going to activate you, and then you're going to start your podcast, and it's going to be called TGI Now. Thank God it's now, and you're going to do that from now on. And I haven't missed an episode since. Every week for over 4 years.
Wow, I love that. So I have questions about that, and I wanna dive into that again at the end, but
Yeah,
I really now feel like I want to take people on a journey like I do with all my other, podcasts of where you started, where you were born. Just take me through kind of a little bit of your childhood.
yeah, yeah, sure, absolutely. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, right outside of Philadelphia, King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. I was there. I grew up. I was born in 1968, so I was there until I was about 17 years old. So I always thought that was going to be where I grew up, and my childhood home and everything of that nature. But we abruptly had to move because my father was part of the Philadelphia Mafia.
What?
Yeah, so he was so he was like a
Excuse me?
he was yeah he was a guy, he worked for what was it, Nicky Scarfo, so he was in his little crew. And I kind of knew as a kid, but I was only a teenager, so I really wasn't sure. But things started to go a little awry, and so he needed to leave. So talk about just being a guy, somebody needs to do something to protect his family. One day one of his friends got murdered, and he was like, we got to go. And so we left. The next thing you know, I was in Vero Beach, Florida, Sebastian, Florida, 1986, a 17-year-old senior in high school that wasn't able to graduate with my childhood friends. And I just ended
Right,
up down here. I had to start all over. I had to just meet new friends. Remember, it was 1986, so it was the whole process of trying to keep in touch with people up north and trying to make friends down here without social media and other things you can do now. So it was a culture shock for me. So it was a little bit of trauma for me and my brother and my sister. So we went through a little trauma there. And so it brought me to this town. Like you said, we were scattered all over the country. I always thought I would grow up in Pennsylvania and be there and never leave, and that would be my home. But now Vero Beach, Florida is my home now. And so I made my home here, spent most of my life here, moved away, came back, did some different jobs around the country, and then came back in 1995, and I've been here ever since. And during that time, I've developed relationships in business, doing nonprofit work, raising millions of dollars for local charities here in town. And that was basically who I was and who my ego was at the time before this all happened. So, but my family still lives here. I have a son who's 19 years old now. So he's on the awakening journey as well. I talked to him about things that were going on in the world and what to look out for and things of that nature. So awakening and having a sibling, I mean a child is tough too. Trying to
right.
explain to your child what you're going through. But that's what I went through, and he saw what I went through, getting fired from the job and all those things.
Yeah. So that's fascinating, and you scooted so fast past it, so I have to go back now. So, um, it's just interesting because my dad's family wanted him to be in the mafia in New Jersey, and his mother took him, and he wasn't, so that's just so interesting to me. So,
Yeah.
when you abruptly left your family, right, and what was the explanation? Did they ever tell you, your dad, your mom outright what had happened?
No, he kinda kept it close to the vest, because he had to at the time, because, people were watching the house, things of that nature were going on. It wasn't like he was in big trouble, like he did some major crimes or did anything, but he was just being watched because he was part of that crew. And so when he wanted to move, he really didn't tell us. We didn't really weren't able to tell our friends. So it was a little tough at that point. So it was very, a very sticky situation, to say the least. I was 17 years old, so I was just starting to understand what was going on at the time, and I didn't want to move either. So I was like, I don't want to
Yeah,
go. I'm a senior in high school. I got friends.
right.
It was traumatic. So it was abrupt, but he did what he had to do, and looking back, I would have probably done the same thing. And I know that's why I ended up where I'm at in Vero Beach in Florida and all that.
Well, I just like to get in your 17-year-old head because it's just such a That's such a unique story. So
Mhm.
you have a brother and sister?
Yes. Yep.
Are you the oldest,
Yes.
youngest, or
I was the oldest, so I had to kind of keep on the down low what we're doing, what was going to happen, kind of protect my siblings. They're like, we're moving, and they didn't really weren't aware either.
yeah, and so, what's interesting at 17, as you said, you were somewhat aware. So, as big of a shakeup as it was, you could have been pretty rebellious, but obviously you had to have known some things to keep you from going off the rails, like, no, I'm staying, whatever, my senior
Yeah,
year.
I mean that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean I wasn't rebellious. I did do it. I did just accept it. And so I think looking back, I mean that helped me grow in character because I was able
Hmm.
to be more of a chameleon in my life over the years. Any kind of job that I did, I was always able to fit in and figure a way out to find to find a way to go along with the program. And so it kind of helped me develop business relationships and relationships over the phone or in person where I just developed those relationships out of thin air. So I think that
Right.
helped me build my character where for my brother and my sister it was a little difficult. They were younger. And so it was a little bit
Yeah.
more, it was more of a culture shock. It was for me too, but I have that outgoing personality. I'm a Sagittarius. So I kind of just, go with the flow and that kind of thing. So it built character. It was tough for a while, but yeah, but it was, yeah. I tell the
And
story all the time, but I used to not tell it all the time. I used to hide it and keep it close to the vest. But now that when I've gotten older, I was always able to say, this is what happened. This is why I ended up where I'm
yeah,
at.
right. Well, we are in a period of truth. Um,
Exactly.
you know, um, and so how was that senior year? And did you just kind of just get through it and because you knew you only had 1 year, or did you make good friends then, or did you just get through?
I did, but I got through too. Like it was tough. Like I look back now, I don't really have a lot of the friends that I went to high school with because it was that 1 year and it was hard to develop those relationships or everybody else grew up together. So I kind of got
Right.
more, I was more in touch with the group after that, the juniors and the sophomores, because they were still around where the seniors went off to college. And so I was still in the area when they all went off to college. So I have some friends that are in the lower grades that I made that I still friends that actually, here's a great story for you. So when we first moved here, we moved to Sebastian, Florida, which is like a tiny little town, like a fishing town in Florida. People probably listen don't even know where it's at still. And we moved here, and there was like nothing here. I moved from Philadelphia to Sebastian, Florida. 17-year-old teenager lived close to one of the closest to one of the biggest malls in all of the country, the King of Prussia Mall. So and then I moved to Sebastian, Florida, where they didn't even have like a fast food restaurant. They didn't have nothing. So I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. So I'm like, how am I going to
Yeah.
make any friends here? Like I'm 17. I came from, Philadelphia. Now I'm in this little town in Florida. I'm thinking, how am I going to make any friends? I'm going to have to go to high school and like meet people. So I'm living in this neighborhood. We just rented a house. And so a couple, maybe a week in, somebody comes down to my front door and he knocks. And this is the old school way of making friends. You like walk down the
Yeah.
street, knock on the door. Hey, is John here? Because he heard I moved into the neighborhood. So this guy knocks on my door. His name was Howard Rizzio, and ever since that day he knocked on my door, me and him have been lifelong friends. Like
Oh,
it happened all in that one thing. He just decided to just walk down the street, knock on the door, and make me feel comfortable. He brought me out. We went to a high school football game, and I was like, "Oh, cool," And then me and him are. I mean, like I've had. He's been on my podcast numerous times. I have two podcasts, so he's been on two of my podcasts. Great guest, great knowledgeable man. But yeah, it's so crazy. Like we're still friends to this day. So I left all my friends up in Pennsylvania, and then the first guy to knock on my door in this town that I moved into was my oldest friend in this town. So it's like it's not a coincidence when you look back and you're just like, wow. We both went through that
yes.
awakening process and all that kind too. It's kind of interesting.
Howie Grizio. He sounds like from where you were from.
I know that's what it was. He was from up north too. They just moved down here a couple years ago. It's all the same, like all the same scenarios. So it was like in a neighborhood, a neighbor family. They all kind of knew we moved here, so we had a little bit of connection, and it kind of just brought everybody together. And we've all still been friends ever since. So those bonds do stick, and God
They
puts
do.
people in front of you at the right time when you need them. And I really needed him at that time for sure. because I had
Yes, how cool is that?
yeah, right.
That's a wonderful story. And so then how were your folks with the change? Were they, was your dad having to be preoccupied to figure out what to do? Was your mom worried about you? I mean, how was all that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was difficult for my mom, and she's lived up there her whole life, and same with my dad. But he knew he had to go, so he had to adapt a little bit to the process of figuring out what he's going to do. Or she was kind of just like very just she had a hard time with it because the weather and it's hot and it's not the same as up north, and it's a culture shock,
Yeah.
and that's what we went through. We
Yeah.
went through a culture shock as a family. We went through some trauma that we had to work through, and so my dad. It's funny, my dad ended up working for the Florida Correctional Institute. So he went from the mafia to a correctional guard at the jail in Florida. How ironic, right?
Yeah, I'm sure he knew all the tricks
Right. So
too.
he just came down. He took the course. He figured it out. He ended up being in there. He was an officer. He did the whole the gyms part of the correction where the guys had their break, and he would do sports with them and stuff like that. So he found something that he was able to do, and he ended up doing it and ended up retiring with it. It all worked out
Oh,
for him. So yeah,
wow.
he's passed away now. Since he passed away 2 years ago on 8/8, actually, it was August 8th. So
Oh,
yeah,
fascinating.
but it all worked out for him. He had a retirement, and life was good. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, to be honest with you. I love where I live, and
Yeah.
looking back, I'm blessed that I'm in Florida, and it's been exactly where I'm supposed to be.
And good for him for making that big leap, right?
Yeah,
To knowing that that was gonna be the only way for his family's survival, though it would be a really rough patch
yeah,
there, right, for
yeah.
everybody, but it was the only way, and so, I mean, good for him, and so is your mom still around, or did she
She passed in 2015, so she's been passed almost 10 years. Yeah, yeah,
so she
she
went first?
She went first, yeah, and when you look back now, when people pass now in the awakening process, like my mom lived in a lot of fear. She was very fear based and very worrisome, and so her passing right before, like 5 years before COVID and the world shifting would have. I just see that now as like she would have never been able to handle it. It would have been very difficult for her to see that. So then that's why she passed away, because she's more powerful on the other side because of what was coming.
Absolutely.
We know what we knew. We didn't know what was coming, but it was obviously written that this was all going to happen, and so that's why we're having this conversation today.
Isn't it so interesting that I think that in this whole picture, it's been instrumental that there had to be warriors on that end,
Yep.
as well as warriors on this end to make this whole thing, and it
Yeah.
really is fascinating
Well, I
for
think that
that.
that it's a testament to my mom for one thing, because one thing that she instilled with us, and going through the trauma that we went through, and the massive culture shock of moving in such abrupt way with young children to a town that we hardly knew anybody. We did have some people we were acquainted with, but the testament to her was that she always made sure she told us, me, my brother, and my sister, always never ever turn your back on each other. Don't ever ever
Oh,
turn your back on each other. You always are always going to need each other no matter what. Don't ever do it. And that was unconditional love that she taught. And so me and my brother
wow.
were very close till to this day. That we've never turned our back on each other. We've never had any massive arguments, or any kind of like, I'm not talking to you no more. You're dead to me. Like a lot of
Yeah,
Italians do. You're dead to me. Like, but we didn't do that
yeah.
because my mom told us we would need each other, and now here we are. We're still here, going through this transformation, this awakening, this biblical time, and we all are still close. And we didn't argue. We didn't fight with each other about COVID or masks or anything of that nature. It was always like, everybody has their choice, and we'll tell each other what we think, and that's it. And we're still close to this day.
So did they though? Were they on did because it's normally just like one person in the family that sees
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
curious if that was the case with you.
No, I mean, I've been very fortunate. I haven't had my circle of influence really wasn't like they didn't see it, where I was like, no, they like, what are you doing? Like, don't do that, or don't take the shot, or don't get the mask. And No, my sister was a little on the fence, but I had to like just explain to her like this is why we're here. This is the event. This is the shift. So this is why we came here. We always think, oh, why are we here? Why are we, like why did we come here? Like why am I still alive?
Right,
That was the shift, and I told her that. I was like, this is it. This is it. Like I knew. I was like, this is it. This is you were just the world is not going to be the same, and whatever comes next, it's going to be more than amazing than we've ever seen because it's a shift into a new Earth reality that all the old is going to dissolve and we're going to birth a new reality, a new earth, a new transformation of a golden age like
right.
Trump is.
And so she heard that. She could hear it enough to
She can hear it. She
that's
heard it
awesome.
enough. And before I was going through my awakening in 2000 and 11, 2012, and I was explaining to her about the way I saw the world, and I was starting to like kind of like be like, man, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm crazy, like maybe something's wrong with me. And I started to have some breakdowns in front of her and stuff of that nature. But my brother was the bigger catalyst for me in my awakening because he was more awake than I was when I was in the Matrix, being that John Corapi, the fundraiser guy, that's the community advocate that didn't get thrown on the front page of the paper saying he's a bully and he's getting fired from his job. He was the one that was like, explaining to me about 9/11, and then he explained to me about child trafficking and about what they
Oh
do
my
with each
goodness.
other. Yeah, he was the one that was red pilling me over time because he saw it because he was looking into it a lot harder than I was. I was too busy playing in the Matrix and just this is who I am, and no, I don't want to hear about it, la 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 la, and then. But then he would say, like, listen to this, just listen to this. Go watch the movie Zeitgeist, he would tell me. And I'd be like, okay, what's that? And I'd watch it and I'd be like, whoa, this is kind of scary. Like, what's going on? Is this real? Like, I just had a child and now we're headed to a new world order. This is not good. Why did I do that for? That doesn't make any sense. What was I thinking? So it's kind of freaks you out a little bit when you watch some of these things, but you need to
Right.
see it in order to realize it. We can the truth cannot be told; it can only be realized, and that's the bottom line.
Yes.
It
It's
cannot be told.
so true.
Yeah, if he was just trying to tell me, tell me, tell me, and I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But if I didn't watch the Zeitgeist and I didn't want to listen to "Behold a Pale Horse" by Bill Cooper and all these different people and Phil Schneider and all these people, these names he would throw at me, and I'd be like, "Who's that?" And I'd go listen to a lecture by Phil Schneider or Bill Cooper, and I'd be like, "Whoa, he's right! Like, we're in a matrix here. Like, this is all distractions. The football and all these different things are distractions." You know.
But most people couldn't even though most people I'm realizing still, but it'll change. Even if you said, "Go look at this, go look at that," they won't
No.
because it will change their whole worldview and they can't risk that, right? So, I mean, that's very, very cool. And so after high school, so you went into the world of nonprofits
Yeah, so after high school, I went to college, got a bachelor's in marketing and communications, and started bouncing
in
around different
Florida?
jobs. What's that?
In Florida, did you
In
go to
Florida,
college?
yeah, yeah, in Florida, yeah, Florida Tech, right here in Melbourne. Yeah. So, yeah, so I bounced around and did some different businesses, worked in banking, started to realize what the banking system was, and saw that it was it was a fraud back then in 1995. When I was like, wow, the banking system is not like I already knew. I was well versed on. I had to. The funny thing is, like my brother would help me with 9/11 and child trafficking and all those different things, but when it came to banking, I had to explain to him like this whole banking thing and this Federal Reserve, like it's a shame. Like I knew it when I worked in banking. So then I got out of banking,
Wow.
and then I went in, instead of lending people money, I went into nonprofit where I was asking people for money. So I was like, that makes more sense. I'll go get from the rich, and I'll give to the poor. That's what I'll do because I live in a very wealthy community on the beach here, and so there's a lot of nonprofits and a lot of wealthy donations and stuff. So I was like, let me go into that instead. Maybe that'll be something I could do. And then I knew God was guiding me at that point. Once I ended up at the Salvation Army, in 10 I was there for almost 10 years. Once I got there and I saw that I was doing God's work and I was getting paid to do it and I loved to do it, and it was in my backyard, and I started to awaken to like, oh, my whole path, my whole everything that's been guiding me has all been by God's hand, just showing me where to go. But once we start to realize it and we start to open our eyes and realize with our real eyes, then we wake up
Right.
to the fact that, wow, like, God's hand is in everything that I do. He's guiding me. It's just a matter if I accept the synchronicities or the signs, or I don't.
Exactly. So I want to ask your thoughts on this because I don't know. You know, when you were in nonprofits, we've heard about all the corruptions and terrible things happening in nonprofits. So obviously there's a layer of people doing really good work.
Mhm.
And then I guess as it gets bigger, there's some bad things happening in some of them. Did, I mean, were you in your bubble that didn't really see that corruption or
Yeah, well, ooh, we can go down that rabbit hole. um, yeah, I mean, I can say that, at the time I didn't, because I did work for an organization called Hibiscus Children's Center here in Vero Beach and Hibiscus Children's Village. I helped build a facility that housed abused and neglected children,
wow.
that were removed from their homes by DCF and CPS. So now you have to
Oh
look at it
wow.
like, oh yeah, DCF. Now that I know what DCF and CPS are all about, and I know what I was doing for that organization, and that organization was getting funding from the state because of that, because they were taking kids in that were being removed from their homes, not realizing that a lot of those kids were being removed from their homes maybe by fraudulent, orders and fraudulent things that were done through the court system. I kind of would have seen it in a different sense, but I wasn't part of that process. But now that I look back, I do see that there was some cycles going back to where these kids weren't going back to their parents. They were being cycled
Right.
into the system and going into foster care and being adopted, which is no bueno. It's no good. It's
Hmm.
being adopted and going into foster care is no good. And you had the kids end of the system, they end up on medication, they end up on drugs, they end up on the street, and it's all by design. And now I see that with my real eyes. But when I was working
Right.
there, building the facility and raising the money, I didn't really put two and two together at the time. I just saw they were pulling at heartstrings to get money so they could build this facility so they could keep processing kids through DCF and CPS. So
Yeah.
it's not good.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, but then and so you were still working in nonprofits when you started waking up to certain things and like you said, was it your brother that started you on that path, or was it a combination of your brother and things that you were looking into
It
and the
was it was
banks?
a combination, yeah, because he was telling me about child trafficking and CPS, and and
How did
as I
he know that?
well,
I
because
wonder.
he's next level. Like he's my brother's next level when it comes to memorization, visual memorization, remembering names and situations and events. So he was able to do that and piece things together for me to show me and just say, hey, watch this or watch that. And of course, he's my brother, so I'm going to maybe think about it. And I didn't always go and look into what he would tell me right away. I'd write it down, like I'd write the name Bill Cooper and I'd write it down, and then I'd put it aside, and then I would go do my thing. And then eventually I go, you know what? I need to look up Bill Cooper. Like it's remember, your higher self is telling you to do it. It's a matter of whether you decide to do it or not, where you accept that
Yeah.
voice, that little nudge, that little push to like,
Yes.
you might want to look into this, because you're going to need it soon. Because we all have our personal awakening that happens, and a lot of times we get angry because we realize that it took us so long, that we're not like, maybe I'm not real smart, like maybe it took me too long, but we always get activated at the right time. So my building of an awakening was basically like I was being prepped for when I got kicked out of the job and then ended up doing the podcast. It was all prep work. It was all practice up until that point to be ready to be activated. So it's like, okay, prep, 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 activation. Okay, now I know what my purpose is, just like what you're doing here. You're doing your call to purpose. You feel like you want to document these folks that are a part of this
Right.
movement, this truth movement, and part of this awakening process. And so you want to document these people like myself. And I appreciate you allowing me to do this, because this is what we need to do, where people can see that, everybody has their own call to purpose. It could be very
Yep.
small, it could be very large, it could be very minimal, it could be, just a small podcast or whatever.
You know what's so fascinating though, John, is that thinking about telling your story and that you had to adapt and it was this big change and you were able to adapt and it sounds like in your life you've been able to just that last year of your senior year you're just able to adapt, but then I mean you weren't this rebel, you weren't this guy kicking and screaming in school, but you became this guy And, and you were the one that stood up there and had that voice, and you were kicking down the door when you that wasn't your story, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
that's what's so interesting about you and that warrior in you. It wasn't and where did that come from, do you think? I mean, where did that come from
it's
when that happened?
it's always been there. It's always been inside of me to do that because a good friend of mine who helped my awakening online, and he told me one time, he said, "John, you're a projector. You have a voice. You have a projection. You have this voice that people will listen to it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, if you say so." I mean, people tell me I have a radio voice, so yeah. So the podcast was it natural. I did radio. I was in radio too before I was a nonprofit. I did a radio show, a sports show for 3 years locally. So it kind of was like practice again. Everything God puts you in a place where you're just
Exactly.
everything was practice. And then I was like, oh wow, like oh then now as you can see behind me, I have a studio in my house now. So it turned into a studio in my home based on a podcast that started off a whim because I just decided to speak my truth. So it's that part of it. It's always been there. And so when I do when I do see that there's some injustice and I see something's not right, I will step in, even if it's in public and I see something that's happening with a homeless situation or anything. Like I'll step in and like be like,
Look,
whoa, what's going on here? Like I'm not a violent person and I'm not like an angry person. But if I see something, I'll open my mouth and I'll step in, and even if it's just opening my mouth is enough to stop something from escalating. So I mean that's always been there, but it needed to be activated. God needed to activate me. He wasn't gonna let me get off so easily by just quitting a job. It was like no, 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 no,
right.
no. You need to be on the front page of the paper. This needs to be the talk of the town for a minute. You're going to be a little bit embarrassed. It's going to hurt. You're going to feel it. I felt it in my stomach. I mean, Ellen, when it was on the front page of the paper, where they delivered the first batch of papers when it was when I was on the front page, it was at my job where I worked. They delivered those to the chamber because that's where the first drop off was for the local paper, was the chamber where everybody came and picked it up. So that morning when I walked into the job, the girl up front handed me the paper and she pointed at the headline and I went, huh? And I looked at it and I opened it and I started reading it and it was said, chamber executive, accused of bullying school board. And I was like, whoa, I was like, is this about me? I was like, wait a minute. I started reading it and I'm going, wow. And so I had that gut feeling. I was like, oh geez, like I'm going to get fired now. Like this is really bad, but it was really good. It was a bad thing. It was a good thing. So like you said, I persevered through it again. It was another scenario where like, oh, I got to start all over again. Like now my reputation, it went down the crapper.
There it is, though. So there it is. So you adapted at the time when you moved, and then, but you went and you had jobs where you wanted to help the underdogs because that's who you are.
Yep.
So God had you practice that along with being on the radio,
Yep.
and so when this time you were literally activated, so the sword that you had for those underdogs was completely activated during this insane time that we were living in, but then you were able to use your adaptive of starting over of what you learned. I love how this works when we put together people's lives and we talk about it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's no doubt about that. That was part of my breaking out of the matrix scenario because it was like I was like either I'm going to do it on my own or I'm going to be forced to do it, and during that time I was kind of like, I was listening to some books on lunch break during that time. So I was kind of prepping for the podcast as I was about to get kicked out of the matrix. So it was all part of that whole process of where it had all just the timing of everything. And then it's built into a lot more, and it's been a wild ride so far.
Yeah, I wanna get into that too, but first, so when you stood up, and I again, I'm gonna put a link to it in the description. When you stood up and were treated just so poorly and, it seemed like it was everybody against you there. In that process, over the next days and weeks and stuff, was there anybody even quietly come to you and say thank you or anything like that?
Yeah, so that's what's built into what I see today is that a lot of the people that I didn't know prior to getting fired from the job are people that are acquaintances of mine now in my new life. So there's just like that's in the book. Behold, I mean, in the book, The Voice of Knowledge, there's that they describe it as the dream of the first attention, and then you got the dream of the second attention. So I was still in the dream of the first attention, and then when I got fired from the job and was on the front page of the paper, I became the dream of the second attention, which is where new people will come into your life. The old people that I was friends with, once that happened to me, they distanced themselves away from me. So I lost a lot of people that were like, I see people today that I was close with in fundraising and all the jobs I did, radio, everything. They'll see me on the street or they'll see me in a restaurant. They'll walk so fast past me that like they seen a ghost because they don't want to have anything to do with me. But now I have a whole group of new people that are on my team now because we were all activated. So now we do a show called The
Yep.
Board Report, which reports on the boards here in Vero Beach. So like the school board, the county commissioners, the city council. We have a whole podcast we do every Saturday night. I mean, every Friday night at 7 o'clock live, and we talk about what's going on in our community. And so that's what this spawned off to be. So people that came to me quietly, like you said, were like, people from Moms for Liberty, the women that go into the school board meetings. They were the ones that were texting me. And so some of them are on the show now. They come on our show as contributors or people that I met. I started a business with two other people that I met at the school board meeting. So now it's called Indian River Connections, where we have all our podcasts under one umbrella. So now they started a podcast. Another person started a podcast. All the partners I have in this business, they all have their own podcast. So now we have a network. It's called in IRC Media. So now we started a whole new media organization. So now we have all this going on that came out of all that getting kicked out of the job.
Wow, that's so awesome. I mean, I that's just, but I wanna go back to something you said because I don't know if this is happening in many other places because it would be a model where you said that the podcast that's on Friday nights is called
Board report. Yep.
Board Report. I
Yep.
mean, does that keep them in check a little bit? I mean, I've never heard of that before about a podcast that's really reporting on what's going on there. I think that's fantastic.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, nobody's really doing it around. We tried to talk to other places to do it, but it came off of the fact that we wanted to hold some of these public officials accountable. So it made sense to say, well, you know what? Well, we go to the meetings, we speak at the meetings. All these people that are on this podcast are all people that are frequent at all these meetings. I go to the meetings still to this day. They weren't getting rid of me. I was like, I'm never going anywhere now. Even if I just show up in my face and my presence, I can feel the difference just being there because they know what they did back when they did it. So they see that like, oh, here's John again. He's back. Like, oh, what's he got to say now? Like, so I know my presence is a lighthouse for those situations. So that's why we go to these meetings. So why not report on it since we go to them? So now we pay attention, we report on them. Joanne Binford's on Binford Chronicles. She follows up with all these board members. She interviews them. She brings some of them on the show if they want. So it makes a lot of sense for people locally to start something of that nature to hold these
Yeah.
people. You hold them accountable. That's all. That's all. You're just putting it out there for whether they like it or not.
That is a great idea.
Yeah.
Just that alone to have something like that in a community, and it would be so cool for all the people that can't go to the meetings and be able to have folks like you report on it, and I mean, that should be happening
Yeah.
all everywhere,
Yeah, no,
you
that
know?
was the whole idea because people don't want to watch a 3.5 hour meeting. But if we take bits and pieces of it and say, well, this is what they voted on, this is why they voted on it, this is what they did, this is what they brought up, give them the meat and just throw out the bones,
Yep.
then it makes the most sense. And we have a contributor that's a newspaper reporter. We have somebody from Moms for Liberty. We have somebody that's a former school board member. We have people that have knowledge, that have skin in the game, that know what they're talking about. It's not just like some random people that just show up at the meeting and speak about something and then leave. No, they've been on the board. They've been a part of the system. They've been on the city council. So they've been news reporters. So we have people that have knowledge that do it. And that's what you do. You round up that group. You get your people, your tribe together. We all become friends now. It's pretty wild.
Absolutely. But tell me about the you said it was a wild ride. I mean, that that time when you're, I mean, to see your an article about you in the paper and you're just standing up to do the right thing and people are going the opposite way to not to talk to you and stuff.
Yeah.
That's gotta do a job on you no matter what. And then, how was that with your family and all of it?
Well, I think that like people were calling me obviously, and some people wanted me to like sue the chamber and sue the school board, because this was May of 2021, so we were in the height of COVID, we were in the height of it all, like all the just the craziness, like wear a mask, not wear a mask, and so it just was it was just a lot of outcry for like why did they do that to you, and I just kept telling people if they didn't do it to me, they did it to themselves. They didn't do anything to
Yeah.
me, and I say that in this. I think I did that in the speech. When I went that video I sent you, I said you did this to yourselves. You didn't do anything to me. Yeah, I lost my job, but all I have to do is lose my life. Is all I have left. So it's just a job. It's not a big deal. And lo and behold, I was like, I was going to leave anyway, but it didn't matter. It was the action that had to happen. It sparked a little bit of an awakening in our town, is what really happened, because it was like, oh, like I was one of the first to really get like fired from a job for speaking at a school board, and I had it on video because it never went really viral. And this was May of 21. I reached out to Grant Stinchfield on some of the newses. I reached out to Fox. I sent the video to all kinds of places, and nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to interview me. They didn't want to touch it because it was early in that stage. They didn't want to, yeah, they didn't want to mess with it. So I thought it would go viral or whatever, but all it did was just spark an awakening in my town. And that's what really all that matters. It doesn't matter that it didn't go nationwide. Everybody went through what I went through. There was all kinds of people that went through it. I just went through it early in the stage of the game. That's all.
Wow, and so that brother, your brother that kind of, saw certain things, was he a cheerleader for you at that point?
Well, he's always been like the concern and the protector, like maybe
Oh,
maybe you don't want to go out there, John, like maybe because he always knew that I didn't want to be part of that controversy. I always
right,
kept my nose clean. I didn't never
yeah.
never been in trouble, never like had anything that was in the newspapers, me holding a big check, and just like 20,000 for this and 100,000 for that, doing all kinds of great charity work for the community. But then it was all of a sudden it was like, no, you're a bully now, and it was like, now they're going to come after you. Now they're really going to give you a hard time. But I just at that point I didn't care, and then that's when I knew that the podcast TGI now had to start, because it was like, all right, here we go. This needs to happen, and lo and behold, it happened. I have two partners in the podcast too, my buddy Eddie and my buddy Rondell, and I never even knew them before the whole COVID thing either. So we got together and put this podcast together, and it's been a huge success.
And so how did you meet those 2 fellas?
So I met Eddie right during the time when I was doing the chamber job, because I was going around helping businesses during COVID get some stimulus, some grant money. There was some grant money available for businesses that were shut down, and so I stopped into my buddy Eddie's shop. He had a shop, a smoothie shop, and a CBD shop, and he was shut down for a minute. And so I brought in there, and I gave him an application to fill it out, and I'm trying to help him get this money for his business. And then we started talking, and I'm telling him some stuff about COVID and this, that, and the other. And then we became friends. So I would stop into his store like every once in a while and just, talk. And I'd start red pilling him a little bit about some stuff. And he'd be like, really? I didn't ever heard about the New World Order. Or, he'd be like, I would tell him something else. And so I was like, yeah, this is what's going on. And then the school board thing was a big deal because his wife worked at the school district. And so one day I was talking to him like, man, they're not listening to these kids out there, these parents about these kids and the masks. And he's like, John, he's like, I see you posting stuff on Facebook, and I see you talking about it on Facebook. He said, but they got you, instead of talking about it, you got to be about it. He said, you got to go out there and go speak at that board meeting. And I was like, you think so? And he's like, yeah, you need to just be about it and go out there. And so and I got fired. And the next thing you know, I'm like, I show up at his job that like 2 days after I got fired, and I'm like, hey man, I'm like, I be about it, and now I have no job. And I said, I guess we should start this podcast because this is how you have to be about it. And we've done 240 episodes every Tuesday night, 8 o'clock. We haven't missed an episode in 4 years. So I mean, that's how it started. It was all really him. He's the one that pushed me to go out there and talk about it. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting how the people in our lives weave that part of us to as things happen. That's so wild. So your podcast, what are the things that you guys cover in the podcasts?
We
Anything
go through
happening?
we go through a lot of things. I mean, we've obviously in the beginning we talked about school board and COVID and and boosters and and then Biden and then we just hit it right at the right time. It was like boom, because in the beginning I was like, all right, what are we going to talk about? Like, okay, I got to come up with a subject matter every week, and then things started just coming out and just things started happening. The election got rigged, and we were just like every week we had so much content. I was like, oh, this is easy. I'll just send these guys a couple things. We'll talk about this. I mean, we got to the point where we were recording the podcast on Tuesday, and we didn't put it out till Friday. And then I was like, guys, like by the time we put this podcast on Friday, it's old news. I said we got to start doing some
Yep.
better. So then we recorded on Tuesday. We put it out on Wednesday, and now we just recorded. We just go live on Tuesday at 8 o'clock because there's no need to record it and put it out because everything's happening so fast. So you just saw the evolution of everything. And I helped my friend Eddie awaken to things. He wasn't familiar with child trafficking. He wasn't familiar with adrenochrome and all these things that were going on. And so I had to kind of red pill him about a lot of things and even the vaccine and stuff. But eventually he started to see it. He would listen and he would watch the things I would send him. So then he would start to see it, and then during the podcast, we would discuss what I would send him. So it was almost like a whole tutorial, like, "Hey, I sent you that video. What do you think?" And then he'd be like, "Wow, yeah, I didn't realize that was real." Like, George Bush said that he was going to turn this into a new world order back in '91. I'm like, "Yeah, I told you. They got to tell us what they're doing." And he'd be like, "Yeah, that makes sense." So he started to see it, and then the podcast really clicked from there.
That is you're such a cool warrior, John, because that is exactly you were the guy that is has been such a hero in these times to you were open to hearing your brother, which you then saw other things. It's kind of that seed was planted with the banking and
Mhm.
and but you were then you just took it and you ran with it and you were just a warrior and then you're not only on the board meetings on a podcast and then this podcast and you're opening up your friends' eyes and in the audience at the same time. That's what this time is about, and you are the epitome of it. And so I just admire you so much
I
um,
appreciate
for
that.
doing that. You know
Yeah, it all
what?
came from just people collaborating. Three guys got together, and then the beauty of our podcast is that I'm 57-year-old white guy, Eddie's a 63-year-old Puerto Rican, and Rondell's a 33-year-old black guy. So we got three perspectives, three generations, and three points of view that we discuss, and that's how we were able to do it. And we started it out. We and our slogan is real authentic truth talk, freedom of speech, and living in the now, freeing your mind one episode at a time. And that's it.
I love it.
That's how
It
we
is
came up
freeing
with it.
your mind, one episode at a time, freeing your mind. I love that. That's fantastic, and that's kind of what I was saying. And that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So one big topic I just want to, be the ending of this part with. What I've realized is the spiritual side of things is undeniable. Undeniable. So your personal journey, where did you always have faith? Did it grow at a certain time? Did it hit a bigness some other time? I mean, what was that story with that?
Yeah, that's a good one too. I grew up. My mom wanted me to go, or me and my brother, and my sister, to go to a Catholic school because she went to public school, and her dad was more of an atheist and didn't really believe in anything. And just said, "Hey, we're just here, and this is all there is." And my mom wanted us to have a base, a starting point. So she pushed my dad to have us go to Catholic school. And so I went to Catholic school for my whole life. So did my brother and sister. So we learned about the story of the Bible. We got into all that stuff. Just kind of it got in there. It was a good base. And then once we moved to Florida, I really didn't, I turned off that a little bit and I got away from it, and so I, kind of went into the matrix pretty heavily, and really just was like, you know what, I don't even want to think about God anymore. I'm just good with that. I don't think there's anything there. Just we got to live and just this is to live it up to where this is all we got. And then as time progressed, I started to get more back into my spirituality and started to realize, like, no, there's way more than this. There's way more going on than we actually realize. There's things going on around us that we can't see, because it is a spiritual battle. And so it is, we are fighting principalities, and they're not flesh and blood. So as time rode on, I started listening to Alan Watts a little bit, and Alan Watts started to teach me about living in the present. That all religions have kind of the same message, and you have to decide for yourself what the prime creator, the main creation. We are all parts of the prime creator. We see life through the creator. The creator is part of us, and so the creator can't experience John Corapi without John Corapi being existing. So now the creator
Yeah.
was able to witness what I went through and witness it and be like, wow, look at John got kicked out of the building and got fired from the job. And the creator's witnessing all this through my eyes. And so that's when I started to realize, like, wow, like, we're here for a bigger purpose than that. And so I did go more like, I didn't believe in God anymore. And I was like, I'm done with that. But then I started to come back around. And so I think a lot of people's awakening journeys are very similar. They lose that connection to God, and then they come back around and they find it again, and they go, oh wow, like, that's why I had that base. That's why mom gave us that base, so that I would be able to come back around when it was time to come back around. Because it's never too late. It's never too late to repent. There's never too late to be appreciative of what you have now, and have gratitude and have hope and have grace to get through this battle, because that's what it is. It's a battle.
I couldn't agree with you more. And so the time when it kind of hit the crescendo, when you were fired from your job and all of that, were you deep into that faith, or did it grow even more from there? I mean,
It
back then, could you see what was happening, or were you just, did that take some time?
No, it was coming back at that time. Like, I was starting to see it. I was actually listening to a book called The Voice of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz, which is a spinoff of the Four Agreements. If you ever read those books, you should read them. They're really
Yes.
good books. The Four Agreements is great, and The Voice of Knowledge. While I was working at the chamber job, the one I got fired from, I was listening to the book, The Voice of Knowledge, and it started to get me back to really where everything all began again, back to my relationship with God, and starting to really see that the voice in our head, the voice of knowledge, is the great deceiver. It's the liar in our head that lies to us and tells us we're not good enough, we're not worthy, we're not we're just this little being that's not that powerful. And then when you listen to the book Voice of Knowledge, it wakens you to the fact that no, we're more powerful than that we come from the source, we come from creator, we are part of the creator. And so that got me back right before I got fired from the job. So that's why I know it was God that was kicking me off the cliff, because he was like, I see, now you're starting to pay attention now. So now I'm going to show you that I'm going to give you a little kick in the butt, and you're going to be awakened, and you're going to be activated. And then when I met my partner Eddie for the podcast, he helped me get back to that faith too, because he quotes the Bible a lot in the podcast, and we refer it back to each other from different things and situations that happen. He'll say, and I'll say something. He'll say, well, as a matter of fact, and he'll pick up the Bible and he'll flip through it. And he'll say, actually, verse, and I'll be like, oh, see, you're right on the money on that one. And so then it would just confirm it for me. It was just confirmation.
I think that is fantastic. I love that story, how it's all that you were brought back to it before all that happened. So you had that.
Yep.
And now you're in this group of guys who are so diverse, but also so knowledgeable in your own way that it just works. And I love that, John. That's just the coolest thing. So are you in a place now? So before I ask that, so your podcast is live Tuesday nights,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
What time?
8 o'clock. 8 o'clock
Eight
Tuesday.
o'clock.
Yep.
So are you at a place now of, because you've learned a lot. I feel like I've learned a lot, but I'm incredibly optimistic, even though we've gone down some pretty dark paths, right?
Mhm.
What is your peace level with everything that's here and coming?
Yeah, my peace level, it's much better than it was about 2.5 years ago. So there's no doubt about that. From 2021 until now, there's a lot of things there's a lot of things I've learned over time with this, if you want to call it an operation, or if it's God's plan, or whatever's happening. You can call it anything you want. I know you have the cue behind you, and I follow those things, and I've been on shows about it, and I never dismissed it. So I was always like, no, I say there's got to be something to this, especially since I read the book Behold a Pale Horse by Bill Cooper, and he
Yeah.
mentioned in the book that he said he had Q clearance, and I was listening to that, and he said it, and I go, wait a minute, did he just say Q clearance? I was like, oh, that there's something up with that. So it always gave me that possibility that maybe this is really happening and things are changing behind the scenes, and I truly believe that. I believe, like I said before to you before the podcast, that God gave me that download in June of 2023, and said that, it's over, my son, it's over. That I already won, but now you're going to have to watch it. I'm going to show you how it happened. I'm going to show you. You're going to have to bear witness to it, and that's it. And then whether how bad it's going to be, you're going to have to bear witness at it, and you're going to have to be a light through the darkness, through the storm, and you're going to have to be able to, help people through this. And but you're
Tell
going to
me
bear witness to it.
tell me that again. So in June of 2024, I just wanna put it in I
2023,
just wanna
2023. Yep, 2020.
2023, you get where were you? What was happening? Where you got that download?
So in the mornings I go out by my Zen area by pool, and I meditate, and I'll say a prayer, and I'll forgive. I do a little like, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you type of scenario, where I just, I do that every morning to give thanks to what I have. And and sometimes I'll ask, like, what's really going on, like, what's happening, is this, how bad is this going to get? And I said that out into myself, and then all of a sudden, I just got a download that said, "Don't worry, it's over. It's already done. I've taken care of everything. It's finished. It's over. And you're just going to have to bear witness to it. You're going to have to see it for your own eyes, how I did it. I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm going to show you piece by piece how I dismantled everything." And I was like, wow. I was like, wow, okay. And I got up and I just went about my day. And the reason why I asked that for that morning was because everything was at a standstill outside. The birds were quiet. They weren't flying around, because I go out there every morning, so I see the difference. And for that moment, it was like June 21st or 22nd of 2023. And I just remember it, and I was like, everything's at a standstill. Why is everything at a standstill? I was like, it just feels weird. Like we're just in this holding pattern, and something's about to change. And then since that, then everything started to change. And then I started to see all the things starting to come out. And I was like, oh, I see what's happening now. Now everything's going to start to just shift. So it was almost like we were spinning one way, and then everything came to a halt, and then we started spinning the other way. So everything was being reversed. Everything's being turned around. And that's what it was. That's what it became to me. I was like, oh, so we were at a standstill. And now when he told me everything was over, now everything's going to get reversed. And then you're going to start to see all the reversals happen. All the things are going to start to change. And everything we thought was good is bad, and what's bad is good. And you're going to see it all be reversed now. And I was like, oh, okay. And then here we are. And I'm very optimistic. I've always been very optimistic. I've always told people in my surroundings and on our podcast that it's going to be the greatest time we've ever seen. We're going to see the greatest time we're going to witness, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. And we're not even going to know what to think when it does happen, because it will happen, and it won't be one man, it won't be Trump, it won't be one person. It'll be the hand
Right.
of God, and that's why God said, "I'm showing you how I did it." But the hand is going to move at some point, and it's going to be undeniable, and that's where you're going to see that change happen. And I think we're on the precipice of it really soon.
I do too. Isn't it so exciting that we have front row seats? Woo! It's so
Yeah, I mean,
exciting.
you're right. I mean, just watching the stuff that was happening today with Zelensky and Trump and all these people at the White, and all I just looked at, I just go, and the movie rages on, because it's just all it
Yeah.
is a movie. I believe a lot of those people that were there today are, like Macron and all that. Either they've been replaced, or they're doing what they're told, and that's it. There's no other way to look at it. They're either been replaced, or they've been told this is what you're going to do, and you're going to like it whether you like it or not, and that's the end of it. And that's what I believe, because that's what I see now when I look at it.
Yes, controlled or replaced, and just as you were told, God said it's done, and
It's
that
done.
we're
It's
just
done.
watching, yeah,
Yeah.
without a
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I mean, I just loved hearing your story, and you're just a piece of the warrior puzzle that has happened over the last couple years, John. So it's been just such a pleasure to talk to you, and I'll be watching your podcast, and you have that incredible combination of faith and strength, and I just appreciate you, and so many people do
Yeah.
around Florida and around the country and the world. So thank you, and keep doing what you're doing, and again, appreciate all you're doing during this time.
I want to add one more thing too. We also started a club called the Conspiracy Club 101, and we do a live show from a venue here in Vero Beach every second Thursday of the month. We just started doing it. We just had one this past Thursday, and so we invite people to come and gather, people that are like minded that have questions, to show up, sit on the panel, and then we have people from other podcasts that'll sit on the panel and they pick a subject, and then we just talk about it. I'll send you the link to the last one we did.
Yes.
It's really good. It was pretty successful. I was pretty surprised, but it's something that people want now, and then we couldn't have done that
Yes.
before. And I would have never done that if the things didn't happen to me that I was activated like I was. I would have never had the gall to sit there and do a live podcast in the middle of a bar in Vero Beach and say, "Hey, step right up. You want to talk about chemtrails? You want to talk about Q? You want to talk about Behold the Pale Horse? What do you want to talk about? Aliens? What do you want? Reptilians? Let's bring it on!" Like that's where we're at this point. So that's why it's so funny, huh?
I know, but the fact that, the people like you who've been through that and stood up and withstood it because God knew you could, and
Yeah,
then would be activated because that light or of people like you all over the world that have been activated, and people are going to come to you more and more because people are going to be hungrier and hungrier for the truth.
yeah,
So what you're doing is just so freaking
right.
fantastic. So
And I'm trying to get some people to come too, like to like be like guests too. Like I want Jordan might come and be a guest one evening and just sit on the panel, or maybe the guys from News Treason or something of that nature too, because they
yeah,
live in Florida. So that's what I'm looking to do too, is to bring some people
that's
in,
right.
pick a subject that they're really good at and sit down and do it, because people feel alone. That's the thing. They feel like
Yeah,
they're alone, and they've lost family and friends. I'm lucky that I haven't really lost a lot of family. I lost them before I got fired from the job. They just ran away from me, so I had to find new ones. So now, but other people have lost them, so they want to find new people, and so that's why we decided
indeed.
to do this. And we have a venue that we can do it at. One of my best guests on my TGI Now podcast, Nick Novak, owns the bar, so he loves the idea. So it's, you have to have that person that wants to do it, but it's a good way to get people together that don't want to feel alone anymore either. And that's part of why we did it. And I think that's why the main thing I was activated was for that reason too, is just to do it, we're not making any money. We're just doing it, you know.
Absolutely, and it's gonna be needed more and more and more as more and more people are faced with the truth,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
of what's
absolutely.
happening.
You're absolutely right.
So,
That's where we're at.
thank you for doing this, and you know, I hope that more people find you with this and all you're doing, and of course they will, and the right people are gonna hear this because that's what it's all about, and your story. So thank you, John, so much. And I'll make sure to put everything in the description so people can find you really easily. Okay.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to sit on your panel here and do this. This is awesome. I watched a couple of your other shows. So they were really good. So I'm
Oh,
excited. Yeah, it's
yay,
awesome.
John. Thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm very honored. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hopefully, we'll talk soon.
Absolutely.
All right.